This will be a short introduction to the Vietnamese cuisine. Vietnam, officially named the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, is a country in Southeast Asia with a population of 92.7 million people. Vietnam is neighboured by a number of countries including China as well as Laos, Thailand and Cambodia. This presentation has been inspired by Hai, a fictional Vietnamese male living in Australia. Many historical events have influenced the culture of Vietnam. From the 1860s to 1945, Vietnam was under French colonial rule, and during this time the French introduced many ingredients to Vietnamese cuisine. The rule gave rise to one of Vietnam's most iconic foods, the banh mi. A banh mi sandwich contains grilled meat, vegetables, herbs and pâté. Prior to this, many years ago, there was also a period of Chinese rule lasting about 1,000 years. In this time, the Chinese introduced cooking techniques such as stir-frying and deep-frying, as well as the use of chopsticks. There are a range of commonly consumed foods in Vietnam. Rice is the main staple food of Vietnamese cuisine and contributes a large proportion of carbohydrate and protein intake in the average Vietnamese diet. Additional staple foods also include fish and seafood, vegetables and fruit, while supplementary foods of Vietnam include meat, fresh herbs and spices. Food practices differ from region to region. The southern tropical climate draws influence from Thai and Cambodian cuisine and uses a range of fresh foods and often cooks foods for shorter times, while the northern areas with a mild climate draw influence from Chinese cuisine and eat warm foods with longer cooking times. The Vietnamese cuisine is a balancing act. According to tradition, the 5 taste elements being spice, sour, bitter, salt and sweet must be balanced. The balancing of these flavours is important in creating traditional meals. The dish's aesthetic is also balanced by colours by incorporating different colours into all dishes. This concept of balance also extends to warm and cool foods. Certain foods are considered either warm or cool and need to be balanced effectively. Vietnam is a multi-religion country. Buddhism is the most prevalent religion and what I will be discussing. A central theme of Buddhism is that one should not harm another. This includes animals and therefore Buddhists are quite often vegetarian as animals cannot be consumed without first being harmed. There is quite a high prevalence of vegetarianism in Vietnam. Vietnam's major food-related import products include soybean products, corn, coconuts, Brazil nuts, cashews, as well as other nuts and wheats. While Vietnam's major food-related export products are coffee, coconuts, Brazil nuts, cashews, pepper, and processed crustaceans. Vietnam's main agriculture output is rice. The major rice-growing regions of Vietnam are the Mekong Delta region of the south and the Red River Delta region of the north. The following graphs are sourced from the FAO Stat website and highlight the differences in key commodity consumption between Vietnam and Australia. This graph is showing the difference between the amount of rice consumed in Vietnam compared to rice consumed in Australia. As you can see, the rice consumption is far higher in Vietnam, with a consumption of 13 million tonnes in 2013 compared to Australians' 258,000 tonnes. This result is expected considering rice is the main staple crop of Vietnam, whereas Australians are likely to consume more wheat. This graph shows the differences in vegetable consumption. While both lines on the graph show increasing trends, it is clear that vegetable consumption is far higher in Vietnam, with a total of 13 million tonnes consumed in 2013 compared to Australia's 1 million tonnes. This graph highlights the differences in fish and seafood consumption. Again, you can see the fish and seafood consumption is much higher in Vietnam, with nearly 3 million tonnes consumed in 2013 compared to Australia's 609,000 tonnes. This large difference is expected due to the large amount of seafood consumed in Vietnam, especially in coastal cities, whereas Australia would tend to have a higher meat intake. Now I will discuss the migration of the Vietnamese to Australia. Prior to the Vietnam War, there were very few Vietnamese people living in Australia. During the war, after the communist north of Vietnam overrun the south, the first wave of migration to Australia occurred after the people of the south were fleeing. On the 26th of April in 1976, the first boatload of adult refugees arrived at Darwin Harbour, which encouraged a great number of arrivals over the following years. In 1981, the amount of Vietnamese-born immigrants living in Australia had significantly increased to 12,000. Since 1976, Australia has become home to a large Vietnamese community with about 185,000 Vietnamese-born people living in Australia at the time of the 2011 census. Within Victoria, a large proportion of the Vietnamese population have settled in the area surrounding Richmond and Springvale. Vietnamese cuisine is widely appreciated in Australia due to its fresh, fragrant and mild dishes. You will be able to find a Vietnamese restaurant in most suburbs and many restaurants, markets, and grocery stores in areas with a large Vietnamese immigrant population. The most popular Vietnamese dishes in Australia are the banh mi, pho, a rich rice noodle soup, as well as fresh rice paper rolls and fried spring rolls. In recent times, there have also been a range of Vietnamese chain restaurants opening in Australia, including Rolled, and a number of food trucks including Lil Nom Noms, Nok Mamas, and Nem and Nem. Thank you for listening to this presentation.